Today I'm going to show you how to do an oil change on a 1998 Toyota Camry LE, a Japanese built one with a 2.2 liter 4-cylinder engine. I drove the front wheels of the car up on these homemade ramps to give me a little more working room so I can access the oil drain plug. You also want to make sure the car is in park and the parking brake is on. As an extra safety measure, I put a block behind the back wheel to keep the car from rolling backward. This is the oil pan I'll be using to catch all the oil. It's nice and wide, so in case it splatters, it'll kind of stay in the pan. And then I have this piece of paper in case it splatters over and I don't want it to get on the cement. And then I'll use this piece of cardboard here to slide my body in and out from under the car just to make it easier. I put on some old clothes and I put on some safety goggles because I don't want hot oil splashing in my face. And I put on some gloves just to protect my hands a little bit. The car has been driven, so the engine oil is hot. Well, it's not hot, it's probably warm because it's been sitting here for about a half an hour. I like to do it when the engine oil is warm. That way more of it flows out. It's perfectly fine doing it when it's cold. I just prefer it when it's warm. But I let it sit a little bit so it's not so hot that it burns me. This is the front right side of the car, just in front of the axle. And that's where you'll find the drain plug for the engine oil. Okay, the 1998 Camry takes a 14 millimeter to remove the drain plug. And I get one that's long enough because I don't want the oil to touch me because it's still going to be warm. Now I'm going to try to catch the drain plug on the end of this. But if it falls into the oil, that's fine. We'll get it out later when we dump the oil into a container for recycling. The bolt's on there tighter than I thought it would be, so I'm going to get my bigger wrench and then I'm going to add this on for more leverage. I'm just going to slide that in there and then I'll be able to have enough leverage to take off the bolt. Now that the bolt's loosened, I'll continue loosening it and you'll see the oil will start to come out. There it goes. As you'll see, I didn't catch the bolt, so it fell into the drain pan. That's fine. We'll get it later. And then I always keep plenty of towels around to wipe off the tools and stuff. I did splash a lot. Now what I like to do is take the oil cap off. That'll get a little air in the system so more of the oil will drain out. And it'll actually probably drain out even without doing that, but I just like to do it. The oil is now draining from the oil pan. I usually give it about 15 minutes. It doesn't really matter how long you wait. I just do it so it gets more of the oil out. So we'll come back in 15 minutes and continue on. This is the warm old oil. I'm going to pour it in that jug there. And you can see there's a funnel on there. Just make sure the funnel is smaller than the bolt that you lost in the oil so that it doesn't go into the container. Because I want to drain the oil out of the pan because when I take the filter off of the car, I want that to drop into the oil pan and I don't want it to splash in the oil. So I'm going to dump all the oil in this container first. Okay, there's my drain plug in the funnel. I'll fish that out so I can put it back on the car. I use a 1-gallon jug to catch the old oil, which is a perfect size because the Camry is a 3.8 quarts of oil, which is almost a gallon when you're changing the oil and the filter. Here's the dipstick and here is the oil filter. It's now, it's still a little bit hot because the engine's hot, but it's enough where I can take it off. I have the pan underneath in case any oil drips out because it is facing downward, so the oil is going to drip down, but usually none gets down there. I take it off and then flip it over real quick. So I'm going to take that off and then get ready for the new one. I also like to get a rag in here and clean around the oil filter a little bit, just so that dust and stuff doesn't go into the engine. My oil filter's on there pretty tight. I can't take it off by hand, so I'm going to use this wrench here to get in there and loosen it just enough so I can take it off by hand. Okay, it's loose now where I can do it by hand, so what I do is I just turn it pretty quick, flip it up, that way none of the oil drips out. So very little dripped out. Now what I'll do is I'll take this, get my drain pan, and I'll put the oil filter upside down in the drain pan. And what that does is it gets all the oil out of the oil filter. And I do that because the oil filter is not recyclable, but the oil is. So I try to get out as much as I can. So there's the oil filter port with the oil filter removed. It's not too dirty around there, so I'm going to get some paper towel and I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down and then we'll put the new one on. This is my replacement oil filter. It's a genuine Toyota filter for the Camry. I find they're not that much more expensive. You can get them on Amazon or eBay or even at a Toyota dealership online. Relatively cheap, especially when you're ordering other parts. Okay, this is the oil I'll be putting in the car. It's a synthetic conventional blend. Now in older cars like this one, which are 23 years old and 90,000 miles, some people prefer just to use conventional oil, which is what comes from the ground and is refined, because that's what these cars were made for. Some people use high mileage oil, which swells the gaskets to keep it from leaking, but my car doesn't leak, so I won't worry about that. This one does have synthetic oil in it, and some people claim the synthetic has smaller particles and will seep out and cause leaks, but a lot of the newer technology has solved that issue. So I'm going to try it, and I'll let you guys know down the road whether it leaks or not. Before you put the oil filter on the car, make sure you take off the plastic if there is one in front of it. And again, you can use aftermarket oil filters. I just use the Toyota ones because they're relatively cheap and easy to get. And then now what we need to do is we need to grease this rim. It's actually already greased by Toyota, so that's kind of nice. I really don't have to grease it. But what you normally do is dip your finger in oil, clean oil, and run it around this rim and then put it back on. So there it is. I cleaned the surface of the where the oil filter goes because I want a nice clean surface so that the seal seals very well. When putting on the new oil filter, turn it until you feel it touch the engine block, and then turn it another 3/4 turn to complete it. I can do it almost by hand. As you can see here, that piece of tape I put on it was pointing straight up. So I need another about 1/8 of a turn to make it 3/4 of a turn from when it touched the engine block. And then that's sufficiently tight. Okay, so I'm going to get a paper towel and I'm going to wipe where the oil's still dripping here to clean the surface. And then I'll clean the drain plug and I'll put it back in hand tight. This is the drain plug. You can see there's a washer on there. Some people replace that every time they change their oil. I never do. It doesn't say to in the manual, and I've never had issues with it leaking. So I'm going to clean that up and put it back in. But I'm only going to hand tighten it because I need to torque it to the right specification that it says in the Toyota manual. So I'll do that once everything's cleaned up. I'm going to use this Harbor Freight torque wrench to get the correct torque on the oil pan drain plug, which is 27 foot-pounds. And I also want to stand corrected. It says you should replace the gasket on the drain plug every time. I never do, and I haven't had any issues. I'll leave a link below where you can get this Harbor Freight torque wrench. Now, some people don't trust Harbor Freight tools. I've checked this against other torque wrenches, and it's spot on. And it's a lot cheaper than some of the more expensive ones. With the oil drain pan plug properly torqued and put back, and the oil filter in, it's now time to add fresh oil to the car. So you take off the oil filler cap. It'll tell you what oil you need to put in it. This one happens to be 5W30. I put in a funnel so I don't spill it all over. I use a clean funnel, not the one I used to funnel the old oil. And then I'll put in the new oil. Since I did an oil filter change, it needs 3.8 quarts of oil. So I bought 4 quarts. What I'll do is I'll put in 3.5 and then I'll run the car for a while. That way I don't overfill it. I want to make sure I don't overfill it because then you run into more problems. Then you have to redrain it because you don't want the oil pressure to be too high because there's too much oil. So I start with 3.5 quarts and then adjust it from there. You can buy the oil in the quart size you see on the left, or the 5-quart size on the right. It just happened to be cheaper this time to use the quart size, so that's what I did. Okay, after you're done filling it up, remove the funnel. I put some paper towels under it to keep it from dripping. Put the cap back on, fairly tight. And I wipe up any oil spills that I spilled on the engine so it doesn't smoke. And then that's it. Now we just need to start it up and test it for leaks and check the oil level to make sure it's correct. So that's how you change the oil on a 1998 Camry with a 2.2 liter engine. My videos come out sporadically, so make sure to hit the notification bell if you want to see more. Like, subscribe, and share this video if you feel so inclined. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.